Welcome back, everybody. Great to see all of you. Thanks for joining us if you are watching us on Facebook at this moment and joining in on the conversations that we're continuing to have here at the Men and Masculine Folks Network with Roderic, Ed, and Sean and myself today. And like we've been sharing, we'll continue to invite other men to join our kitchen table conversations as well. This is our fifth show at this moment, our second live one. So we continue to encourage folks to chat with us live and to message us as well too. And we'll put those messages and comments into our conversations as we stream live here for the next hour or so until 1 o'clock. Again, critical conversations between and amongst men and masculine folks about masculinity, manhood, and violence and how we navigate our lives in the current context of how we're all living in this environment. Today, we really want to shift a little bit and put a pause from our previous conversations on accountability and really pick that up at some point again, maybe in the next 2 weeks. But taking the time today, and because this month is really Domestic Violence Awareness Month, really taking the time today and in this moment to really honor all of the survivors, all of the people who've been impacted, family members, bystanders, quote unquote, men, women, folks, queer folks, gender nonconforming folks, Black folks, white folks, indigenous folks, Asian folks, Southeast Asian folks, South Asian folks, Latino folks who have experienced and witnessed domestic violence within their own home and within their own communities and are working to stop it as well. So really taking that time to do that and really talk about domestic violence in this conversation today amongst us in our kitchen table conversation and what that really means as well. So every year, the Violence Free Minnesota, formerly known as the Minnesota Battered Women's Coalition, puts out a report. Since 1989, have put out a yearly report, which they call the Domestic Homicide Report, that really honors and speaks about domestic violence, homicides, and honoring all of the victims and survivors who have died, and bystanders and family members who've died because of domestic violence in the past month. So the 2019 report just came out a few weeks ago. I participated in it at their press release that they did, meaning Violence Free Minnesota. We'll put a link to that report in this live chat and when we post up the video as well too. So you can all have access to the report. It's pretty easy read. And you can see what they share. There are recommendations for policymakers in there as well too. There's recommendations for community folks in there as well too for what to do with children as well too. So it's actually a pretty thorough and good report with recommendations on how we can prevent and end domestic violence in our lives and in our communities' lives. With that said, again, my name is Pheng, and I want to make sure that each of my good friends here get to introduce themselves again to everybody, and then we'll have Ed take it away from there.
Hey everybody, it's good to be back. I'm Sean. Pronouns are he, him, and his. And yeah, like Pheng said, we've got that link for the report in the description of this video. You can check it out there.
Hey, I'm Roderic, Southall. Welcome everyone. Look forward to the conversation today.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Ed Heisler. I use he and him pronouns, and it's beautiful to be with you all today. Not sure if this is true in the Twin Cities or not, but we're supposed to get a huge amount of snow today, actually, maybe up to 5 to 10 inches of snow, and we've already got a blanket on the ground, and there's a certain heaviness outside that's beautiful, but there's a heaviness that can sort of be felt across across time and space, it almost feels like. and so that's a thing that exists and is neither good or bad. But I can tell you that it's really helpful to see faces of people I love and respect, and to be able to connect even in these times where we're largely in our own places. So Pheng asked me to help kick things off today by actually, we want to take some time to honor the victims from 2019 of domestic homicide. And so I'm just going to do a highlight of the overall numbers, and then read the names of the people who lost their lives due to domestic violence in this year. So I know that everybody's going to have access to a link that explains where you can read more information, the full report, which is fantastic. This year there were 16 current or former intimate partners who were murdered in a domestic violence situation, and there were 5 other victims who were bystanders who lost their lives as well. And so I'll just take a moment to read each person's name. Jenny Marie Kingbird, Julie A. Neifel, Mary Jo Loons Jansen, Alexandra Light Jacobs, Nicole Ann Jaswinski, Jessica Tashonda Williams, Crystal Marie Bundy, Darla Marie King, Sauda Abakar Mani, Rebecca Lee Meringer, Minia Yang, Michelle Mary May, Brittany Lynn Roy, Raven Bianca Grant, or Gant, sorry, Kirsten Marie Ellington, Thea Renee Tolles, Candy Cheryl Gucci, Heidi Eve Pierce, Mark Franklin Jr., William David, and Nelson Sidney. Just take a moment to pause and feel the loss that is reflected in each one of those names. The people that were represented, that are represented, not only the victims and the people themselves who lost their lives, but the people who lost mothers, the people who lost sisters, the people who lost friends and family members. The way that the fabric and the connection in our community is actually torn anytime anyone loses their life due to domestic violence. Take a moment to acknowledge and feel that loss, and celebrate the people that they are. Thank you. So in honoring and respecting those folks, I feel myself, even in the immensity of the loss, sort of just feeling the almost an overwhelm, like a thing that's like a buffer between the immensity of that loss, the reality of it, and in trying to hold it together to read the list of names and try to get everybody's name as close to correct as possible and all that kind of stuff. So we're going to make a shift into honoring these folks by also honoring women and femme folks in our lives who helped make us who we are, who are part of the story of who we are today. And so an invitation, I'm not sure who would like to start, but an invitation just to share some story around that today.
I can start. I can echo kind of what you said, Ed, just hearing the names read. And, you know, I notice that I'm holding my breath oftentimes in those moments, and I can kind of feel like a tightness in my throat, and that heaviness is real. And, you know, thinking about the women and femme folks who have, you know, helped me get to where I am today, helped me, you know, become who I am, the kind of man that I am and am seeking to be. You know, I think about my mom, for starters, you know, always there for me, despite having, you know, some different worldviews and beliefs, but just the love that I felt from her right from the get-go. And then I think of my wife, Amy, and how much she has challenged me, loved me, supported me, helped me as I'm kind of on this path, you know, growing towards a version of healthy masculinity. And then I also think of, you know, some of the people that I'm in community with, whether that's at my job or not. Sarah Curtis, Natalie Crowley, there's just so many names that I could list. And without those people, you know, I would not be here. I would not be having this conversation. I'd be on a very different path. So I am really deeply grateful to all of those people. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. I'll go next. So the shift for me actually is the shift from the report, right, and the honoring of the humans that were lost. It points me in two directions. One, it points me back to a pamphlet that I read when I was in Boston. There's a writer named Audre Lorde that had done a booklet that was lamenting the ease at which the lives of women of color in Boston had been allowed to happen. And so she wrote this book sort of saying, here are the stories about these women that you haven't heard, and in part because the community had not focused on it and the police hasn't focused on it. And I remember that being sort of the first text I read that really talked about the violence that is perpetrated on women. And that stuck with me. And I think that was a signpost that pointed me in directions that led me to where I stand now. So that's one piece. So coming off of the names, that was stuck in my head. The other piece is just honoring, I really appreciate the number of women in my life who act as, well, again, I guess they're signposts in the sense of, you know, they're like, whoa, you're out of line here, because they point out really clearly, you're out of line, and then, but I love you and I appreciate you, and that's why I'm letting you know you're out of line. And then perhaps this is the way you going forward. So I have a number of women, like, you know, Frangina, a good friend of mine, who is really good and comfortable in saying, whoa, wait a minute, let's deal with what you brought. And another good friend named Suzanne Roberts. Both are these sort of amazing, gigantic wayfinders and signposts in my life.
Yeah, well, thank you. And thank you, Ed, for reading and sharing the names and honoring. I want to make sure that as we ask and engage in this conversation, we also make sure you all share with us as well too, you know, the women and femme folks in your own lives that you also want to honor, and put it in the chat while we have this conversation. I think it's, you know, it's really hard to pinpoint one or two persons, as I think Sean and Roderic, you both shared. But I think if we were to pinpoint only one person, quote unquote, I'm reminded of a good friend of mine, which I've since lost connection with. And I had met her in my first year of college, and I think she was in her last year already. And she was there, and she was quite independent. She was quite fearless and wasn't gonna take whatever. She was living and rooming with 4 other men, and that wasn't typical. She was a Hmong woman, and that wasn't typical, quote unquote, for a Hmong woman to be rooming with 4 other Hmong men. And it was like, that was a big no-no, and it's a no-no in our community as well too, you know? And so I was like, huh. I mean, it wasn't surprising to me, but I was like, how do you navigate these things? And I would spend conversations and time with her, and have conversations with her, right? And when she was about to graduate, she shared about like that really going to college. She was the first one in her family, and also she was a woman, the first woman in her family to also graduate college as well too. And she said that she wasn't doing this for her dad, because her dad didn't believe that she should have gone to college, right? But like, you should have been married already, and what are you doing? No one's going to marry you now, right? Because now you're too, quote unquote, too smart. But she said, I was doing it for myself. Going to college she was doing it for herself. And I think that like, that struck me in a way that I couldn't, and I still can't like really sort of articulate, but it struck me in my body, I think, not so much my heart, but in my body, in a way where it's like, oh, in life, there are things and there are times when we have to do it for ourselves, that we can't be always doing it for other people, you know? And that she had the will to be able to do and go to college for herself, not for her father, you know, because her father was like, you're probably not gonna graduate, you know. But when graduation day came, her father was there. He was so happy to see that she had graduated and walked, you know, in the ceremony. So I think that she gave me some light and some inspiration of like growing up in a community, right, where you see a lot of visible ways in which women are harmed and girls are harmed, and like practices where that you're like, oh, I don't agree with that, or the way in which relationships or the treatment of girls are very different, because I grew up in a household of 6 sisters, and I was very aware of how they were different than me and how I was treated compared to my sisters. And being able to connect with her, you know, that college friend, and being able to see her, I was like, that's what I would want. I want to make sure that my sisters get that will as well, to get that opportunity and get that chance to say, I'm doing it for myself. You know, that I have this opportunity to do that for myself, and that I, as their brother, I would be there to make sure that happens, right? However they would like me to make it happen as a support, you know, as a support. So I think that that's what is making me think about the honoring piece of the women and femme folks in my life, about the kinds of inspiration that they've drawn out of me and continue to will in me to stay in this work, quote unquote, and to continuously speak up and practice new ways of healthy masculinity and healthy manhood that doesn't actually contribute to the violence that we see in the world. Yeah.
Thanks, Pheng. Yeah, and I really appreciate you inviting, we are in a broader community of people who are watching or will watch this in the future, and the importance and the beauty in actually sharing and interconnecting the community of people and family that have made us who we are is really, it's a special thing and something that we should be practicing, on a regular basis. When I think for myself, it's kind of like, I'm like you, kind of shake my head and try to figure out, like, so who am I gonna pick? Because there's been like just this broad network of women and femme folks who have shown me a tremendous amount of love, built relationship, held space, helped teach me how to be in community in different ways. And like the really specific and obvious ones are like, my mom, my co-director and partner at work, Sarah Curtis, my partner, Jean. There's really lots of solid folks. And I think the story that I would share is actually, I had two amazing grandmas. My grandma, Mary Beeler, is still, she's still around and being a matriarch of the family. And she is going to turn 90 years old in a couple of months. And it's probably true that we won't be able to celebrate that with her in person. But she's still providing leadership in the family and holding space for family and for community. And one of the reasons that I choose her, I always grew up being about 3 hours away from where she lives. But we did spend a fair amount of time throughout a course of a year visiting and doing things like that. And my grandma and my grandpa, they both grew up in a lot of poverty and in a situation where, alcoholism in both cases, and in my grandpa's side in particular, violence against women and family violence was a really normal thing. And the two of them together, she'll talk about how they actually made specific choices and faced what they had experienced, and decided that they wanted to create something different, which I realize now created the conditions for a lot of healing and for the possibility for me to sort of emerge into a world where I had to, the things that I had to deal with, some of my predecessors had dealt with, beforehand. So it made it just that much easier for me to move forward. So there's that piece of the equation. But as a result of having experienced a lot of things in her life, both good and challenging, she also is like one of these people who is just like direct. She raised 7 kids. She basically marches towards anything that needs to be done. And she's like, something I'm still trying to learn that is a trait of hers is she's just decisive. She's like, this is what needs to happen. And she goes and she does it, right? And then she doesn't like ruminate over whether she did it right or whether she did it wrong. She just like does it with all of her might and goes for it. And she's a person, she's been a strong, like practicing Catholic for a long time. And she is a pillar in her own way in the community, a spiritual pillar. And there's a period of time when Catholicism was something that I would sort of inherently just sort of be like this about. But what appreciate is that she has, I grew up, waking up in the mornings. She has a small house, so I would sleep in the living room, and I'd wake up hearing my grandma's like rosary beads clacking on the table, and she's turning pages because she has like lists of like 100 people that she prays for every single morning, until whatever it is that needs to get resolved, or whatever it is that's like going on, comes to its fruition. And then for a while they come off the list and other people filter on, and it's just an ongoing practice that has been going on for decades and decades and decades. And then she has the people in the world that she's decided need the extra prayer energy. She has 2 lists. She takes at least 2 hours a day, going through that, taking time with each person. And, as a kid, you just sort of hear it and you think, well, that's a thing. My grandma prays, I go to church, that's the thing. But now, like, especially in the conditions that we're in, like understanding the way that she is a person who is like holding this like spiritual energy and sharing spiritual energy and being in community with people, whether it's physically or whether it's through space and time in different ways, seeing herself as connected to others in a very, very powerful way, and having like taking responsibility for like the part where you get up early in the morning and you get yourself set, and then you go with all of your might to like for the benefit of others. Like that's who my grandma actually is. And she does that in person too. Like people who live around her, will come, and her house is kind of when it's not COVID, it's kind of always a place where people are going in and out of and getting food and stuff like that. And I could go on, but I think that that's one of the main things that she's taught me is this combination of her directness in moving towards what needs to be done, and the way that she holds that responsibility and that belief that she can be connected and be a part of the goodness in people's lives. She is not afraid to be happy and to find good things in life, and to help create happy, good things for other people. And she's not afraid to face the difficult stuff that exists in life too. And to hold both of those things in their beauty and move towards it and be. And I'm aspiring towards that. I still struggle with getting angry about it, feeling down about bad things that happen, all sorts of things like that. But I'm finding through this incredible network of women and femme folks, and also men and masculine folks now, you 3 included, Felix too, that like all these people have helped me learn how to emerge into community, and how to like be in a way that is okay with my own healing, with my own joy, with my own goodness, with being responsible and connected to other people. And my grandma has been there the whole time, actually being like a through line of that for me and my family.
I know it. With all of this sharing, I'm reminded about like the impact that people have on our lives, particularly women and femme folks, to that of men and masculine folks. The way in which we are shaped, the way in which we are bounded and bonded, come from their influence. But yet at some point in our life, in the growing up as a masculine and a man person, growing up as a man person in this world, we're taught, to separate from that bonding and that bond that we have with female and femme folks and women folks. Yet the way in which I think we learn the nurturing aspects of life come from those individuals. And so I'm reminded of that in our stories of sharing here, that the nurturance part of femme and women folks is really present and is really visible, and is much needed in the lives of men and masculine folks, for us to be able to do it with each other as well too, in a way that's not, and I don't want to say that in a way that's like condescending or arrogant or whatnot. But it's very true. I think it's very true, and it's even for, you know, Ed, you shared this at the beginning about like even reading the names every time. I think we've done events, or I've done attended candlelight vigils, or attended some honoring, some symbolic honoring of people who died, and survivors, and women for the most part who've died because of domestic violence. It's a very sadful and painful, you know, honoring, because you know that these people and the women folks who've passed and who've died had a lasting impact, and some kind of a impact on the people that they were in relationship with. They did something in that short period of time with the people in their lives, and they shaped, and they're going to forever shape those lives that are still living and breathing, especially that of their kids, you know, that it will be forever shaped. And I think, you know, I think about how violence that's so intimate and so close like that, whether it be domestic violence or sexual violence, how that is something that I think we always talk about healing, right? But one of the struggles that I've had is like, how do, like, it's a thing that leaves you scarred in some ways for a long period of your life, and which I believe that there's recovery to it, but like it's something that you don't ever get back. You know, I don't quite know how to describe that, but I think it's something that's been emerging for me for the last month or so of like, what does that mean, right? Like when we it's our job and it's our work to also work with the people who cause harm, particularly the men folks who've caused harm, right? And you know, Men as Peacemakers does domestic violence programming. I do some of that in the community as well too, and it's important that we do that work, and to get these male folks and men folks back to a place where they can be in community and be whole and be connected again, and that justice be served at the same time to the survivors and the victims, and to the harm that they've caused, and for them to be accountable. But I think for like people who've experienced that harm directly and indirectly, there's just something about it that I'm like, no matter what amount of healing that is done, or no matter what amount of recovery or whatever it is, it's just something that you don't ever get back. And which I think is, it's so unfair at the same time. And I'm just like, I don't know how else to describe that, you know. And it doesn't take away from the way in which we do transformative justice. It doesn't take away from any of that, of like being in community and being whole. But that's just something that I wanted to share in this moment that's coming up for me as we are taking the time to honor victims and survivors who've been impacted directly by domestic violence, and like how the children who are left behind and with their moms being gone, how then do they become whole, or can they ever become whole, right? Because I don't know if that's something that they'll ever get back.
It really does make me think about the role that community needs to play, and what, you know, our purpose here isn't to get into a conversation about what restorative justice or what transformative justice means, but we've been talking about accountability and what it means to be in community. And one of the things, so I mentioned Sarah Curtis, one of the women who has played a huge role in who I am and who I'm becoming. One of the things that she'll talk about is, you know, the way that we live, particularly in this form of American culture that we have now, the way that we are pushed to keep going and to produce and to not feel things and to like move on and move on and move on and move on. And she'll say sometimes, you know, when somebody that she knows has been taken has been taken, she'll say, how is it that other people can't feel the gaping hole that's left? Like, how is it that we aren't able to actually sense that? Or how is it that the people around can see, like, they know that I'm sad and they know that other people's sad, but how is it that we've lost our connection to being able to like actually sense the void that's left when someone else decides that someone from our community doesn't get to be here anymore? Or even to your point, Pheng, that enough like violence and damage is exacted that that the person actually has to like do their own struggle in order to get back to wholeness in a way. You know, our responsibility as a community, my responsibility in relationship to her and to people generally, in part, is to try to reconnect whatever part of me I've disconnected, or whatever walls I'm putting up that makes it so that I'm able to like read a report like that and say, okay, that's 16 names plus 5 other names. That's just what it was this year. I'm going to go on to writing a grant, right? Like, it's not that I'm suggesting that people should sit down and, you know, work their way into an infinite sadness about a report like this, but are we open and connecting to the fuller effects of what it means when people in our family, when people in our community, when our friends are going through violence, trauma, oppression, when someone is murdered and lost from the community? And can we see ourselves more deeply responsible and more deeply connected to the way that those tears or wounds heal within the community, knowing that they don't just heal like that, you know? I don't claim to have answers about exactly how you do that, except to be in relationship and open and sort of, you know, looking for the ways that we stay connected when things that are incredibly amazing and when things that are incredibly damaging happen around us.
I was thinking about walls as you were sharing, Ed, and I think, you know, for myself and, you know, people who identify with masculinity, the walls go up so quickly, you know, when we're young. And then it's like, it seems like it's this process of, okay, first, like, I have to realize that there are these walls up and I'm not allowing myself to really deeply connect with the people in my life. And then it's like, you know, I think I'm at this point where it's like, oof, I know I have these walls up, you know, to protect me from, you know, the fear of being vulnerable, the fear of admitting that I've hurt people, that I've caused harm to people. You know, and I just, you know, just last night, my wife, my partner was sharing with me, you know, a very small way that I had caused harm, that I had hurt her feelings. And wow, it's like I can remember right back to that moment where it was like I just wanted to stay in this like angry, I'm right, I didn't mean to hurt you kind of place. And I was able to catch myself in that moment and just sort of stop, you know. It was like a pause that I needed to do, where it was like, okay, I need to remember who I am. I need to remember that this is someone that I care super deeply about, right? And am I really able to hear what she's saying? Am I able to like really connect to that pain that she's felt? And then how do I respond? Like, what does that look like today and the next couple of days as I'm, you know, trying to remember, okay, that's that wall that, you know, is always up or comes right up when someone wants to hold me accountable for, you know, the ways that I've messed up. And so I think, you know, these conversations are just like invaluable to me, because it's like, it's not often that we can be in a room with other men, with masculine people, where we're really like able and willing to like let those walls come down and just say, you know, I've messed up and I'm going to continue to mess up. And I want you to tell me when I do that so that I can continue to work on that, you know, the journey that I'm on and we're all on.
I like someone mentioned about sort of the way we live. And as I was thinking about the women as signposts, in my case, or wayfinders, and I was just wondering to myself if I was trying to think of the times when other men have recognized and been able to articulate to me the presence of walls, right? And if they were willing and able to say, you know, let me be your signpost for this around situations, because I've done a lot of community work, so I've had no shortage of older, in my case, Black men who have sort of maybe sought to be mentors, I suppose. But the mentoring wasn't about being in healthy relation with my own masculinity. The mentoring was always seemingly more about sort of how you get this organization built or that, you know, and so it is really juxtaposed from the way in which women and femme folks have been signposts in my life. And I was just wondering, as someone talked about sort of the way we live, I was wondering, does that mean that's how I live? And that might be in my modeling where my limitations are in terms of being healthy being a healthy peer to other men who are seeking to be better men in that fuller, more righteous, holistic sense. So I'm kind of standing in that place right now, sort of wondering, I need to think about how I live.
Yeah, as you were talking there, what it reminded me of, Roderic, was how when I was still a part of the Hennepin County Fatality Review Team, and we were reviewing domestic violence homicides cases and looking at the entirety of the case. And in each situation or in each case, quote unquote, people in the family knew what was happening, what was going on, right? And the recommendation we always put out after reviewing 3-4 cases per year was always educating community leaders, educating family members about the signs of domestic violence, right? But I think education isn't enough. I think what we need to do is we need to push bolder and further than that to equipping people with the tools and skill sets like you're talking about. The way in which you're living your life, the way in which you intervene in other men's lives, right? How do we get men and masculine folks to have the tools to equip to actually intervene in their brother's life, in their uncle's life, in their friend's life, in a way that actually then could potentially stop the violence? That may be all that it needs to take, right? Is I'm gonna call in and check on you. Why don't you come with me at this moment? Rather than you keep staying here, and then you may continue, and you may then choose a choice that you may regret later on in your life, you know, or you'll really be sad about later on. So I think in that's what I'm thinking about, is like the postmarker and the signs that you're talking about. Is like we get those signs and we see that all the time when domestic violence homicides is about to happen and the survivors are reaching out, and our male friends or our male family members are a little bit quiet. He doesn't seem like quote unquote himself, or he's acting in a way that's not consistent to how he may typically act, or he's acting more he's doing much more than what he typically does, or there's something, right? So I think there's a ways in which I think for us and our job is to be able to do that, and to be able to actually say, how do we intervene in a way that, and how do we equip the men and masculine folks in our lives to be able to navigate and have those conversations and do that, right? Because again, every single one of those cases, family members knew, but nobody stepped in. Nobody stepped in to do something, right? That could have prevented something from happening.
Yeah, I appreciate that too. I think that's a really useful observation and question that you put out there, Roderic. It's I can think of a couple of men who, in their own way, have helped me see walls, or have sort of helped tear them down, or just bring them down. But it is a rare, like, it's an observation that brings to mind for me what a just a across the board in men and masculinity, it's pretty common to avoid actually talking about those walls and helping each other remove them. And Pheng is really highlighting like why that can be so important to people's well-being and safety. But it's something that it's like new enough for me that when you say it that way, I'm like, oh yeah, okay, that's a part of how I want to be for other men and masculine folks. And I can think back not too long, like months, years, to where like how easy it is to sort of accept the help from women and femme folks. The fact that they're signposts to be in community, to be like sort of in conversation about the way that, your walls are going up, or your full humanity is it's got a little bit of a lid on it. And then be with other men and masculine folks and sort of be like, we're going to stay at this sort of relationship. We're just going to stay here. And like, and I think that that's a pretty normal thing. And I'm thinking to myself, if that's the way that I commonly am, like I have to work really hard not to do that with the men and masculine folks in my life, how much more, and this is true for me, like it is challenging when people are behaving in ways that are hurtful or are potentially dangerous or things like that. It is challenging to actually do what Pheng is talking about and figure out your way to like to be in relationship with them in a way that can help find the way of what needs to happen, help interrupt the behavior, help them identify what's going on for them, help with healing. A lot of times the reasons that we avoid these things is because they're creating a lot of discomfort within us. Like we're not quite sure how to face it either in ourselves or in them. But that is one of the things that has to be at the core of how community is built. And I think the way that I have learned how to intervene and the way that I practiced it is by sort of getting mad at people, or by, rushing in there and saying, this has to stop, or like, that's not okay because of this, and this. But one of the things, like one of the legacies, one of the lessons that I'm learning from what you two have just shared, as well as if you think about the modeling that women and femme folks have done in my life, is that it actually takes being willing to be in like relationship, to love people, to be willing to hold a space and be in the messiness and be in the discomfort and be in the place of your own growth, my own growth, in order to start mending and building community in that way and interrupting the harm that we see that's happening. So I think you struck a chord there for me.
I was thinking about what you said, Ed, about sort of, you know, when those situations happen where we see harm is happening, and, you know, we have that choice. Are we going to stay silent, or are we going to intervene? Are we going to come forward? And I think for me, you know, I've been doing this work for about 3 years now. You know, I know a lot about it. I know, you know, how to do some of these things, how to be vulnerable, how to do those things, though they're still hard. But I think for me, it's like I'm always afraid of not doing the quote unquote right thing or saying the right thing. I get caught in that personally, where it's like, you know, it's not about being right or wrong. It's about being there for our community, whether that's, you know, one person or more. But and the other thing I'm thinking about too is this modeling piece of, you know, for those of us who have spent time having these conversations, you know, it's really easy for me to stay in these spaces, you know, to continue having the conversations with you all, to continue sort of that growth. And yet, you know, when I think about the people I'm connected with, the men, the masculine people, non-binary people, you know, how can I actually start doing this stuff, you know, not just talking about it, but actually modeling it in a way where it's, you know, it's not about doing it in perfection. There is no one right way, you know, to do this or to talk to someone about harm. But yeah, I feel like I oftentimes am frozen in that, you know, well, I should probably know a little bit more before I step in, or I'm not really the right person to you know, insert myself in this. You know, this person probably has other people who can talk to them. And how often is that happening, you know, with men folks, where we're just afraid, you know, I'm afraid of messing up. I'm afraid of, you know, looking silly or whatever it is, you know. And so how do I, you know, get out of that frozen spot and actually start taking some action?
There was a woman who wrote this book called "What If I Say the Wrong Thing," which now she's on a really lucrative speaking tour, and that her book's actually about saying the wrong thing about race, and perhaps her next edition, right, or someone's next edition will be about entering, trusting in what you know, right, and forgiving what we, you know, the mistakes that we make if we should call upon something wrong. I was thinking about sort of the other victims that are listed and wondering, as we have the conversation about sort of who knew what when, who intervened, who didn't, and wondering sort of about the stories of in this case the men who were victims as well, and wondering sort of what was their journey into this situation, right? And did they know, did they see it coming, and was their intervention sort of part of multiple steps to intervene, or was it at the point, which I think I would probably fall in without continued proper guidance, and like, it's happening now, I need to intervene, as opposed to 3 months ago when I'm seeing signs that I'm doing what I often do, and that's like, they got a ton of family. Someone's picked up on that, and someone is, you know, advocating my responsibility of living in the moment with that person, and understanding that the grace that I always say people should have for other people doesn't mean silence, right? It means acting in a graceful way to with everyone's humanity and wellness in mind.
Yeah, I think you're unlayering for sure, Roderic. Many of the nuances and dynamics that um, that we can look at when we think about like the community aspect and family responding, and how do we equip families and community to also have the tools to respond in a way, right? And because we live in such an individualistic society, it's always me doing it myself, right? Like what Sean was mentioning of like I'm doing it, but I think in these kinds of spaces, if we can build these kinds of spaces and connections with other men and masculine folks in our lives, in our families, how do we coordinate with each other, right? How do we coordinate our intervention with each other? How do we name it in visible and vocal ways? Like me sharing with Ed, if he was in my family, blood family, quote unquote, that he would know that Sean in this moment is causing harm, right? And that we would then coordinate our intervention with Sean. And it wouldn't be Ed doing it alone by himself in that moment, or me doing it alone by myself in that moment only. And I think that that's the missed part. And I think that that would be the part that we would need in communities and in families, more of a coordinated effort of, instead of somebody not doing something about it, taking one person taking the initiative to be able to coordinate family members to reach out, do a safety plan, do an intervention plan, as we would do with people who have and may have been impacted by addiction. One person alone isn't going to be able to help that person, but I think a community and a family does. And we've seen that in communities and in villages in other parts of the world where people come together to do that kind of an intervention. So I think we can definitely add more to the conversation. And I think that there's much more that we can unlayer there and really dive deeply into, especially around the practice that Sean was talking about. Is like that is why it's so critical that we not only think about these things and feel these things and have these kinds of conversations with men and masculine folks, but that we actually get to practice that with each other in these moments, right? Like, can I practice with all of you this? Like, being able to model with each other is really important, because I've always said, when we go to war and they're going to hand you the gun and you haven't practiced, and they're like, we trained you, this is how you do it, you better just prepare to die in the battlefield. I mean, I'm laughing and joking, but that's what it is, right? If we all we do is talk all day long, but you don't go and practice it. When you say you're going to do it, then you're going to probably fail at it, and you'll fail miserably at it. So it is the practice. It is the practice that we must do, and so that's what I'm learning in this conversation today, as we honor the survivors and the victims who've all died because of domestic violence, and give each one of you some moments as well to share your thoughts about and reflections about the conversation, and then have Sean close us out here.
I can't wait to start practicing. That's my recap, short and brief, and acknowledging how wonderful it is to be in community and be asked and challenged to practice.
Me too. I think I can keep it short and sweet like that as well. And just also recognizing the various people that we've all brought in to this conversation, who have helped us be who we are and learn what we've learned. And that when I think about like the communities that we're talking about creating and the futures that we're trying to create, like that actually is the collective web of family that is being weaved. We do that in part by sharing these things and bringing these people and their lessons and their way of beings into space with each other and sharing. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I feel full and hopeful and nervous. Yeah, practicing is scary, and that's also kind of where I'm feeling, you know. I mean, yeah, got to face that fear because it's way less important than people's lives, you know. So, you know, we've come to the end of our time together. We just want to thank those of you who are able to join us live, and also those of you who have watched this after the fact and are keeping up with these conversations with us. We want you to join the conversation. So we also wanted to, again, thank our philanthropy partners, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Minnesota and the Women's Foundation for their support and their part in making these conversations happen. As a reminder, we're having these conversations every 2 weeks. So 2 weeks from today will be our next conversation on November 5th at 12 p.m. Central Standard Time. And if you'd like to catch previous conversations that we've held, you can find those on our YouTube channel. There's a link in the description of this video for you to find those. And again, we just are very grateful to be in conversation together with all of you. Reach out, connect with us, and join us for the next one. We'll see you later.